we go towards the direct experience in its wholeness, meaning the sensations, the feelings, any history that might be there. We look also at the identity. Who am I in this experience? Am I a 5-year-old? Is this actually not even my experience, but my mother's or father's? Is this a cultural layer? Or do I not even know? Is there not a self here in this experience, right? We open and soften and allow it and contact it like we're walking through a doorway and regarding where we are as the sacred ground, not trying to get to some idea of a non-dual spiritual state or what someone else might have said about what capital T truth might be, because that can also get in the way. We can just be absorbing spiritual teachings and then using them defensively in a very subtle way.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today I'll be speaking to Miranda Macpherson. Miranda Macpherson has been guiding others into direct experience of the sacred for 30 years. She is the author of The Way of Grace, The Transforming Power of Ego Relaxation, leads the Living Grace Global Sangha, offers retreats internationally, and serves as a core faculty at the Shift Network. In your experience, what is it that we're all looking for?
Well, I would say that we're all looking for authentic peace and happiness and freedom and wholeness. And the good news is that fundamentally those qualities are what we really are. So the work of spiritual awakening, whatever path it is true for you to walk it, is really about uncovering these beautiful qualities that typically we're all seeking for externally, but they're not to be found in external things and circumstances. They are naturally sewn into the fabric of who and what we are.
Yes. I agree wholeheartedly. And isn't it also just the seeking itself that is often obscuring our basic nature?
Yeah, I would say that the ego's primary motto, not just your or my ego, but, all of our egos are fundamentally the same ego. The motto of the ego is seek but do not find.
Right.
Because to find what you're looking for ends the game.
Yes.
Of the externalization of the goal. Yes. And it ends the remembrance. So we need to actually realize that it depends on what level we're looking at things. In the beginning stages of our path, we do need to exert some effort and roll up our sleeves and get to work and look at things, and the spiritual path does actually require that. But at the same time, it's all about surrender, relaxation, letting go. And sometimes that means letting go of the search to get enlightened or to become some idealized version or fulfill some ideal that's actually really in your head.
Yes, totally. Right. And that relaxation can be quite spontaneous, because that's what's natural too. The contraction called me, isn't that just a phantom?
Yeah, well, I would say that if we look at what is ego, this thing that we're all trying to get past on the spiritual path, on one level you could look at the ego as just layers upon layers upon layers of contraction.
Yes.
Right? Around a concept, I'm separate. I'm separate from God or the source. I'm separate from you. I'm separate from nature. And of course, all spiritual paths are trying to help us relax out of that construct in various different ways. And it's a construct ultimately.
Yes.
And so I like to use the term ego relaxation, because I think that for too long, spiritual teachings have been given through only a masculine lens up until very
Yes. Oh,
recently.
very.
And I think, the shadow of the masculine, and I think it's fair to say maybe you might feel differently. I'd like to hear what you think. But I think the shadow aspect of the masculine is this sort of going at it, the kind of macho approach. And when we go at spiritual awakening with that kind of approach, when it comes to how do we move beyond the constraints and concerns of our limiting ego and its patterns, we can very easily aggress upon ourselves in the name of awakening. And I think that actually builds a bigger ego and creates a battle that isn't necessary.
Oh, I totally agree.
And so the feminine approach that I like to share with people is, think of it this way. Notice what happens when the warmth of the spring sunshine just touches the ice pack in the mountains. It starts to melt it. It
Yes.
turns a substance that is originally hard, opaque, fixed, dense, and it transforms it back into fluidity and transparency and flow and freedom with something that is so natural and so gentle.
Yes.
Contacting those fixated, hurt, bound up, confused, separated places in ourselves with just this unconditional, loving presence.
Yes.
The transformation happens actually very efficiently and with a lot more compassion for
Yes.
our humanity along the way.
Yes, yes.
I call that practice ego relaxation.
I like that. I like that. I like both the term and the way you're describing it, because I believe ultimately it is that unfolding is quite natural. The more we push it, the more we effort at it, the more we struggle at it, the more we're just reinforcing the very thing we think we're trying to get rid of.
Right. And then it creates a lot of frustration too. And often, lack of kindness for just the wild ride of being a human being, and the fact that we can't help but create an ego structure. And even though we all feel frustrated with ourselves sometimes when we hit upon dense patterns where we get reactive or scared or controlling, or we behave in ways that we don't want to behave, and those are all part and parcel of doing the work, facing those things.
Mm-hmm.
But the way we face them, the way we work with them, can be a lot kinder. And actually, what I have found is that the surrender happens, it's really a non-doing.
Yes.
It's paradoxical, but when the authentic letting go takes place, what it actually feels like is that you're not doing anything at all.
Yes, yes. I love this discussion we're having about how there's an easier way to approach growth and self-discovery and dissolving, that spontaneous dissolving of ego that happens as you recognize truth. It's not something that needs to be forced. It's something that's natural. It's something that, as we just allow it to unfold, it does itself more and more.
Yeah, but there's a lot that we can learn that lets the process, my language for it would be to become more graceful.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? That the process of transformation and awakening that isn't bypassed, that is in and through the various obstacles and issues and what's classically called vasanas, obscuring tendencies, the process can be more graceful as well as more efficient. And the result can be that we become more deeply embodied in our realization. We become the living embodiment of grace.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm a very practical person. I think this also comes with the feminine approach to awakening, but it might also have something to do with the fact that I'm Australian. And we Aussies are very down-to-earth, rubber meets road people. I've spent 3 decades of my life now really working deeply with people, in the interface of their deepest suffering and their most sincere desire to wake up. So I'm really interested in what actually works to help to allow the grace and the surrender to happen, and along the way for the suffering that we find ourselves with to be transformed into wisdom. So this ego relaxation that I'm talking about isn't a conceptual up and over. It's learning how to go towards our immediate direct experience. Whether that experience happens to be an ego experience like a wave of anger, or whether that happens to be something like grief or anxiety, or whether it's something a lot more subtle, like a new gate to a realm of consciousness we don't yet fully understand is sort of beginning to open, the practice is the same. We go towards the direct experience in its wholeness, meaning the sensations, the feelings, any history that might be there. We look also at the identity. Who is this? Who am I in this experience? Am I a 5-year-old? Is this actually not even my experience, but my mother's or father's? Is this a cultural layer? Or do I not even know? Is there not a self here in this experience, right? Mm-hmm. We open and soften and allow it and contact it like we're walking through a doorway and regarding where we are as the sacred ground, not trying to get to some idea of a non-dual spiritual state or what someone else might have said about what capital T truth might be.
Right.
Because that can also get in the way.
Big time.
We can just be absorbing spiritual teachings and then using them defensively in a very subtle way. I see this all the time.
Yes, me too.
So I'm pretty rigorous with the people that work with me about keeping it real, being where you are, and trusting that right where you are, the divine has circled on a map with you saying, enter here.
Right.
Right. Open to the grace and the gift that is right here inherent within this direct experience. And every time what I have found, it never ceases to amaze me, is that when I surrender in and through my direct experience, relaxing opinion, judgment, whether it's good, bad, spiritual or not, all that nonsense, things open up and more grace and essence emerges. And it reminds me so beautifully this process that my Satguru, who was Ramana Maharshi, he said that grace is always present.
Yes.
That we think of it as something high in the sky that has to descend. But he said, really, it's inside you, in your heart. And the moment you merge the mind back into its source, or in other words, you let the mind drop into the heart, grace rushes forth, sprouting as if a spring from within you. And that is my experience over and over again, both in my own inner work and as I work with my students, is seeing the grace sprouting up like something new emerging that is beautiful, meaningful, hydrating. And what always blows my mind and touches my heart so deeply is seeing that the form of the grace that is most needed for that soul in that moment is what comes up.
Yes.
It comes up and shows us that the nature of reality is so loving and so beneficent and always trying to bring back what's really needed. If only we will trust the process.
Yes, beautifully put. And also, wouldn't you agree that the biggest challenge and all of what's experienced is already grace in action? This is
Totally.
This truth that we all seek, or this beauty that we all seek, is already imbued into each and every breath, each and every experience. It's what we're living already.
And what's living us? I mean, I'm
Yes,
always
exactly.
saying,
Yeah.
consider the naturalness of just breathing. I mean, right now, we're breathing. Everyone's breathing. We're all breathing together. Isn't that beautiful?
Mm-hmm.
And like how just this natural, everyday, ordinary thing like breath happening is a natural invitation to receive grace and a natural surrender. It can be that. I mean, all the plant kingdom right now is compassionately absorbing human carbon dioxide and then tonglening it, transforming it into life-giving, sustaining oxygen so that we can live. And that a press release from us isn't needed for that to be so. It's just so. You know, the trees aren't going, oh, I'm not sure whether that one over there deserves it. We'll withhold the oxygen for
Right.
him. It's just doing it.
Yes, yes.
And also how if we recognize that phenomena, it teaches us, you know, that every breath is love. And even the impetus to draw breath is already there. It happens involuntarily. We can also, you know, work with our breath, but when we recognize things like this that are just part of the natural reality and flow of things that we are part of, it really helps us to get a feel for how natural waking up can be.
Yes, yes. Well, it, it's it's already happened.
And happening
Yes,
both at
yes,
the same time.
yes.
Hmm.
That's beautiful. So, is there steps involved in what you call ego relaxation? Anything you want to share
Yeah,
with
there's a lot.
well,
And
any part you want to share is fine.
yeah, well, I'll start with firstly, we have to understand what grace really is. Because often that word is used, and often people don't really understand what that means. They think of it as a divine blessing, which it is. But one of the things I've written extensively about that I've really seen very clearly is that there are four primary dimensions or ways in which grace manifests.
Mhm.
And the first of them, which is very important but often overlooked, is that grace is the primordial ground of reality, that the ground of everything is a loving goodness, is a beneficence, and that it's operating in nature, it's operating in our bodies. And when we recognize that that's true, by turning our attention to see things like what I've just been saying about the interaction between the plant and the human kingdom,
Yes, yes,
right? The more you turn to see that, the more it really helps you to be able to relax out of the dense issues of ego that everyone has to deal with, like
yes,
fear, control, judgment. You know, these are pretty big forces that are foundational to ego structures. So it gives us a place to just come and be in the moment and actually rest, to find rest, even though we might in our human life be journeying through something tough like a divorce
yes,
or loss of a loved one or an unexpected difficult juncture in our career, which, you know, isn't easy. So recognizing that grace is the ground of everything helps you to gain traction and deal with these big waves of ego, fear, control, judgment that come up. Grace is also a loving presence that we can take in and let permeate and penetrate and nourish us. And that happens the more we cultivate virtues, classical spiritual virtues like cultivating trust and cultivating humility and cultivating patience and cultivating joy, cultivating forgiveness. These virtues actually open us to receive subtle gifts and blessings that really nourish us and make us resilient and optimistic even in challenging times like those we're living in. Grace is also the agency of transformation itself. So it's a very important thing to understand this, that as we, there's a dance that happens between our, what the Buddha called rightful effort, or what Ramana Maharshi called the gentle effort that we do need to engage, and the actual transformative power of grace itself. And so that tends to run through time-tested spiritual transformational technologies like forgiveness, like discrimination, so that we can really see our ego structure for what it is and understand it, and see the layers and the levels and the conclusions and how our ego activity operates. Without seeing that, it's not going to surrender. It has to be seen fully. So yeah, the whole transforming power of grace, there's a lot to work with that helps us to engage these time-tested spiritual practices and technologies in a way that is deep and real and meaningful and dimensional. And then ultimately grace is something that you become. It's something that you be. And that happens as you apply these deep spiritual practices to things in your life in what I call on-the-spot moments. Like you can come out of meditation, but then what happens next as you go to your desk and you open up your emails? Do you contract back into your ego structure in order to communicate and write emails? Do you forget everything that happened on the chair, on the cushion, and contract back into thinking you're the one who's doing everything? And so living the embodying grace, or grace becoming a verb, becoming something that is what's taking place in your way of being, really has to do with, living into as we go about our ordinary business. So there's a lot to it. So there's quite a big map. And so for the practices, what I teach, has three aspects. It's a trinity of meditation, and I teach very specific meditations that help us open to all those four dimensions of grace. Inquiry is a big part of what I teach, and I teach inquiry in a holistic sense so that we work on the level simultaneously. We work on the ordinary level where we need to see our past and our history and our defenses and the forces that are driving them and understand that, and also inquiry that points us to what is beyond those limitations and the identity that is experiencing those limitations. It's the whole enchilada. Mm-hmm. So there's various different inquiry practices for every subject I teach. We look at their inquiry practices for everything. And then the third aspect is devotion, because without devotion, there's no engine. We need to be powered by love. We need to be powered by prayer. And prayer can be subject, object, I, thou. Sometimes when we're really stumbling in ignorance, we have to just be humble and real enough to say, help. I'm really caught.
Yes.
I really
is
believe,
a surrender, yes.
Yeah, it's also humility.
Yes.
To actually kind of confess, hey, beloved God, I am really believing these stories in my mind right now, and I'm kind of addicted and pretty attached to them right now. Even though I know they don't serve me, I'm having a hard time relaxing out of them or letting them go. Help me to be willing to see what I need to see, face what I need to face, open to what I need to open to, So sometimes we need to not have the pride, but be humble enough to pray like that. And at other times, our prayer is just a turning into a mantra. And I'm a musician, and so, we sing and work with Sanskrit mantras as part of the work. It is very beautiful, and it's a way to marinate in living streams of grace that have been prayed and worked through by billions of beings throughout time. And so to me, it's like, oh, why wouldn't you utilize that too, open to all the help that we can get.
Yes.
So there's a lot. And of course, in my book, you know, in all the chapters, there's meditations, there's prayers, there's inquiries. And this summer, I'm really kind of excited about it. We've been taking these teachings and making them into an interactive kind of oracle, cards.
Yes.
And so they'll be coming out in June,
Nice.
a whole deck with a book called Cultivating Grace. So 64 cards that have, a spiritual invitation, and a practice that, people can work with and interact with and enjoy and have fun with it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Mm.
It sounds like fun.
It is fun. Yeah. Creative. Juicy.
Yeah.
Grace is juicy.
Yes. Grace is.
It's not this dry, old, dusty, non-dual kind of path here. I'm kind of the antidote to all of that, actually.
Yes. Yes. Well, there's so many. There is a lot of that dryness, but I discovered from my own direct personal experience very early on that unless there's a balance of love and wisdom,
Mm.
they kind of they really merge into each other. I love Nisargadatta's quote, when I know I am everything, that is love, and when I know I am nothing,
That is
that is wisdom. And
Right.
that's been something that's been a living part of what manifests here for decades.
Yeah.
And it's in very much in the way we teach too. It's all very heart centered,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about just facilitating that natural unfoldment.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I think that we need to remember that ego isn't just ignorance, it also represents our human suffering.
Yes.
And what's really obvious to me is that suffering must be met with love. It won't let go without the love, won't let go without the full seeing either. But for most people, the suffering has to do with, insufficient loving kindness in the mix. And that had a lot to do with the constellation of these very tricky patterns and defenses, had a lot to do with disconnection from unconditional love.
Yes.
So it's obvious to me, and it takes a lot of love to look at things we need to look at that aren't easy to look at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, I've been accused of being too mothering at times, because as this body is male, but the energy that's carried here is very female a lot of the
Yeah, I
time.
can see that. You have a beautiful quality of heart.
Yes.
I mean, obviously the balance is required.
Obviously.
Obviously, I'm in a feminine form and I'm unapologetically embodying that feminine. And people either, a lot of people love it and some people find it's not quite for them, but fine. But there's a lot of rigor too,
Yeah.
which is more the masculine aspect in one sense, although if you were to look at it from a Vedic perspective, you see plenty of rigor in Saraswati and Durga.
Oh, yes.
Right? So,
that's for sure.
it's
They can be ruthless.
totally ruthless. And so in a way, the people that I work with very deeply, we're really going there and we're not mucking around. But I do understand that we do need, like a surgeon cleaning out a wound, the surgeon needs to go in there and get all those shreds of glass out of the injured tissue. But they need to do that with the greatest sensitivity and attunement at the same time.
Yes.
And I think given, what we're facing sometimes, those two aspects are needed in balance together.
Agreed.
Mm.
Totally agreed. So can you, is there something specific, a practice or a process or an inquiry, anything from your tool chest that you think everyone listening and watching this could pick up and experiment with right
Yeah.
away?
Well, the one that I would say to start with, because it will nudge you into the state of ego relaxation, which is like having a vacation from the stress and the struggle and the judgment of your ego structure, is this question. But before I give it, I want to just say to those who are listening, don't think about this question. Just like let the question enter you and notice what happens energetically, or just notice the response that happens. So here we go. What's it like right now if you open, soften, and allow your experience to be exactly the way it is? What's it like right now if you open, soften, and allow your experience to be exactly the way it is? So if you just take some breaths and notice what's happening, if you just open, soften, allow, don't try and change, fix, or rearrange. Letting your experience to be exactly as it is. So you might notice, if you just stay with this, opening, softening, allowing your experience to be exactly as it is, you might notice there's relaxation starting to happen. You might even feel that in your body and your breath. You might start to feel a sense of ease, as if you're okay and everything's okay. And you'll probably notice that any kind of whirring of the mind just quiets down. So I would encourage you to put a timer on 30 minutes. And for 2 minutes on half-hourly intervals, just stop and just be with that question. What's it like right now if I open, soften, and allow my experience to be exactly as it is? And this will help to restore you to the original factory setting.
Right.
Which is ego relaxation.
Yes.
Which is just simply being without an argument, without a judgment, without a pushing and a pulling. And that this is actually what makes you receptive to being found by grace. So that is the very basic foundation of ego relaxation that anyone can do. You don't have to believe anything.
Right.
Just give it a go.
Wonderful suggestion. Wonderful. I like the idea of having people set a timer and then doing that. It's a good reminder.
You know, back in the early days, I mean, this dates me, doesn't it? When I was in my 20s and I was really starting to knuckle down in a real way with spiritual practice, I was working with the workbook lessons of A Course in Miracles. I'm sure many people know about that. And I noticed just how I would really show up in the morning, you know, and read it, and I'd do the exercise. I was very sincere. And like by 10 o'clock, I would completely have forgotten what the workbook lesson was.
Right.
I was so frustrated with myself that I took to writing it on my hand. And of course, over the day, you know, the pen ink started to disappear. It's like, but there was something about that that was an embodiment of, I want to remember. I want to stay with this throughout my day and apply it, which was what was being asked.
Yes.
And so it helped to forge a real devotion, which is why I emphasize devotion as well, because We have to want it and value it from our heart. It has to matter to us, or we won't have the motivation to stay with it and engage it and apply it to everything that's going on. But now we don't have to write it on our hand. We've got these devices and we can use
Right.
them for helpful purposes.
Yes, yes.
We can turn off all the unnecessary little pings and yet use it judiciously. Find a beautiful ringtone, maybe a mantra as a ringtone or something, so that, what it is that reminds us, take a moment to just rest and be. Is not something that triggers, it's something that triggers, yeah, I want to.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's very much one of our core principles too. We have just a simple term for that, which we call welcoming.
Beautiful.
And of course, it has many synonyms, all of which you used in that process. That's beautiful, beautiful. And I love this again. It's a suggestion. Anytime you remind yourself to stay engaged on a regular basis, especially in the beginning, it's so helpful. It's so helpful.
Well, not only is it helpful to us, but I believe that it's a gift to our world too, because we are all transmitting our quality of consciousness all of the time, and everyone is being affected by what is being transmitted. And the transmission is coming from where we abide. It's not necessarily coming from what we say and do, although that matters too, but it's our quality of abiding that will transmit itself in the field of our relating and our presence. And if more of us could be transmitting from our depth, this world would be a different place.
Yes.
So anytime you engage your spiritual practice, whether we call that remembering or ego relaxation or prayer or anything else, that brings us back to the truth of our unity and the love and the peace and the freedom that is what's so. And we become one with that again. We rest in that. It's not only supportive of our peace of mind, it's giving off a beautiful fragrance rather than a bad smell.
Right. Yes. I wholeheartedly agree. We could use just a touch of that right now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've been giving to some of my advanced students practices to do while they watch the news.
That's smart.
I notice I need it, so
Right.
they do too.
Yes. That's great. So, do you have any parting guidance or thoughts or perspectives you want to share with the audience?
Just encouragement for people, just encouragement. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to pretend. You don't have an ego. You don't have to talk a good game. Just don't. It doesn't help. Being honestly where you are and being sincere in facing what you need to face and, really opening to that. I want you to know that there is so much love and grace and support whenever you show up in a real and sincere way. And when you genuinely mean it, when you say, I want to see what I need to see, I want to open to what I need to open, I am willing, that is profound and mighty. And when you sincerely say that and mean it, infinite support is with you. And so my love and support is with you. And if there's something that, if you have liked this interview, then I hope you'll go to my website and take advantage of the many resources that you'll find there. There's downloadable meditations, teachings, mantras, videos, audios, a lot of material for you to take advantage of that I really hope will be supportive to you on your path. And trust yourself.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Miranda Macpherson. You can learn more about Miranda at mirandamacpherson.com. That's MIRANDAMACPHERSON.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you'll have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levinson's work, and the Sedona Method, please visit www.sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's SEDONA.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.